The internet, particularly sides of populist Twitter, is aflame with rhetoric about J.D. Vance. The new right loves him, the groypers hate him. Ultimately though, this is meaningless because the internet, and in particular Twitter, is not real life. Vance's job in order to win the Senate seat is not to win over movements that are filled with a perpetually online class of people that I'd like to formally dub the Basement Caucus, but rather to build up a network of volunteers that are able to phone bank and go door to door to get his message out, recruit good campaign staff, and win over donors to get the money he needs to finance his campaign. An endorsement from President Trump also wouldn't hurt. We can talk about J.D. Vance all day long. I have in a previous video as well, link in the description. I will make more in-depth videos about him in the future as well, but this video is about the two major opponents that he faces in his journey to the Senate, those being Josh Mandel and Jane Timken. This video is directed directly at Ohio voters, and with the case that I am able to lay out, I hope to convince them that Mandel and Timken are phony, inauthentic, and undeserving of their vote in the primary election next year. This is the Yankee Perspective. Enjoy the video. I'm sure everyone knows by now about the fact that foxes still lurk in Washington. Opportunistic Republicans that are enemies of the Trump revolution that act friendly but stab us in the back every chance they get. Ronna McDaniel's strategy, as I've said before, for the establishment and Beltway Republicans to survive and maintain power is clearly to get them to refine their image as something good for the white working class that make up the contingent of the population that propelled Trump to the presidency in the first place. This means replacing obvious rhinos who are honest about their beliefs with ones who are willing to stay private and toe the party line. This means replacing Adam Kinzinger with Catalina Lauf, Paul Ryan with Kevin McCarthy, Rob Portman with Jane Timken. Before 2010, Jane Timken was no one except the wife of Ward Timken, the CEO of Timken Steel, the now 104-year-old steelworking company based in Canton, Ohio. Ward Timken, also known as Tim, is worth around $29 million, and they both live in Stark County, home to Canton, Ohio. In 2010, she took over as vice chair of the Stark County Republican Party, and from there she became the favorite of the Trump wing of the Ohio Republican Party, who sought to oust the then sitting chairman Matt Borges, who was the hand-picked choice of Governor John Kasich back in 2013. An excerpt from a Cleveland.com article recalls, in October of 2016, Bob Paduchik, a longtime campaign operative in Ohio, sent a two-page letter to the state GOP's Central Committee saying Ohio Republican Party Chairman Matt Borges no longer has a relationship with the campaign. The letter accused Borges of exaggerating his relationship with Trump in media interviews and undermining Trump's efforts to win in Ohio in order to advance his own candidacy to replace Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus. Sound familiar? After becoming president, Donald Trump personally called members of the state Central Committee to encourage them to vote against Borges and for competitor Jane Timken. As a result of this, she won her election and became the Ohio Republican Party chair in 2017. Timken initially supported John Kasich in the 2016 primaries and opposed Donald Trump. This wasn't a concern for Donald Trump, and his 2016 opposition to the president is one of the things that detractors have to hit J.D. Vance with. J.D. Vance's transition to the truth is a lot more genuine. His conversion happened coinciding with another major event in his life and a change in how he saw the world, his conversion to Catholicism. With Timken, there was none of that. When it became politically advantageous for her to do so, she publicly began to support Trump. In February 2021, in her fourth year as chair of the Ohio GOP, she resigned to seek the seat of retiring Senator Rob Portman, which takes us to the present day. Jane Timken has never held elected office before. She's the wife of a very wealthy businessman, an RNC insider whose wealth and connections have gotten her to where she is today. She has no real record to point to, and the people in power have chosen her over a genuine American populist. In other words, she's a dead ringer for Kelly Loeffler. And I'm not the only one to make this connection. There's no voting record that I can point to with Timken, no amnesty votes that I can point to expose her as the rhino that I know she is, and I hope I never get the chance. That being said, there are several incidents that I can point to that expose her as the fraud that she is. First comes with the Timken Company. When her husband took control of the company, changes began in its business model. Notably, the size of Timken Steel Shanghai Corp. Limited Company saw its operations explode to the point where it was comparable to the employment of its American operation in Canton. This spike was owed to a significant amount of outsourcing, as her husband cut costs to send jobs overseas to China, one of the things President Trump fought most strongly against. According to a Breitbart article, as of February 25, 2021, she held 2,810 shares in the Timken Company, with stock values at $78.91 a share. Hers alone were worth $221,000 total. Her husband, however, has tens of millions of dollars worth of shares that make up the vast majority of his millions. Timken has no formal management role in the party, but she was a major shareholder, meaning that she would have some say in the outsourcing of these jobs. Not to mention that she was married to the man formally responsible for these decisions. It can only be assumed that Timken didn't care enough about that outsourcing to do anything about it. As a result of her inaction, her husband cut nearly 3,000 American jobs by 2009, years before he was finally forced out of the company. As chair of the Ohio GOP, she signed a letter in support of Mike DeWine continuing refugee resettlement in Ohio despite President Trump giving governors the option to opt out. That letter was filled with a number of misleading statements and outright lies, saying, first, one of the many promises President Trump made when running for office in 2016 was that his administration would be more diligent in vetting refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants. In actuality, he promised no more refugee resettlement, period. Assimilated refugees are not taking jobs from job-seeking Ohioans. This should be self-explanatory. Accusations that the federal government is letting dangerous individuals into the country through poor vetting are no longer accurate. Much of the direct cost to help resettle refugees is paid by faith-based groups, such as Catholic charities, who do the resettlement work, as well as federal programs. I could read the entire letter off and I could explain why it's all wrong, but I'd more or less just be reading verbatim off of an Ohio Star article, and it'd probably just be easier for you to read that, so it will be in the description. Over the past year and a half, despite being a Republican governor in a red state, Mike DeWine has handled the coronavirus pandemic by following the playbook set by Andrew Cuomo and our nation's Democrat governors of forced lockdowns and masked mandates. As a result, he's had articles of impeachment drafted against him by the Ohio State House. Timken naturally backed him up, calling the effort despicable, attacked the representatives who did it, and praised DeWine's leadership in instituting lockdowns and mask mandates. One of the 10 House Republicans that voted to impeach Trump in early 2019 is from Ohio, Anthony Gonzalez. He's a relatively recent addition to the House, only entering it in the first place in 2019. In his primary battle for the seat, he faced Christina Hagan, who is an actual America First conservative dwelling from Stark County just like the Timkens. Of course, Gonzalez ultimately prevailed, largely thanks to the backing of her husband Tim, who endorsed him and threw him a country club fundraiser to help him win his primary. Timken, of course, was publicly neutral on the question, but it's pretty easy to guess which candidate she preferred based off of her husband's avowed support for the man who would go on to vote to impeach President Trump. The entire debacle could have been avoided if Jane Timken would have shown a little more courage to do the right thing and step down from her phony pedestal of neutrality. In early February, just before Timken announced her intention to run for Senate, she gave this answer when asked about Anthony Gonzalez's political future by Andrew Tobias of Cleveland.com. I think he's been a very effective legislator. I don't know if I would have voted the way he did, but I think he's spending some time explaining to folks his vote, and I think he's got a rational reason why he voted that way. I think he's an effective legislator, and he's a very good person. So, there you have it. As of February 21, Jane Timken had no idea how she would have voted in the second impeachment vote against Trump. She just doesn't know. This is the woman who Don Jr. allegedly had to talk Trump out of giving an endorsement to. And if he endorses her, I don't think I will properly be able to quantify my disappointment. Luckily, the base seems to know exactly who Timken is, because she was recently booed at a Trump rally when he asked the crowd if they liked her. A recent poll has 34% of the electorate as undecided, J.D. Vance at 6% before announcing his candidacy, Timken at 16%, and Josh Mandel at 35%. Josh Mandel is going to be a tough nut to crack. His strategy from day one has been to relentlessly pander to Trump's base as thoroughly and shamelessly as possible. This relentless pandering makes it hard to find fault with any of his rhetoric in particular, so rather than attempting to nitpick it, I will be sharing with you a plethora of facts about Josh Mandel himself. It will be up to you to determine whether his messaging can be trusted when it comes from a man with a history of activities like these. Think about what a stereotypically corrupt politician may look like to you, who their donors might be, their activities in office, how their personal fortunes may grow at a rate vastly disproportionate to their salaries while in office, what their jobs may be when they are no longer in office, and most importantly, what they would be willing to do or say to make sure they get the positions of power that they crave so desperately. Back in 2011, a businessman named Ben Suarez from Canton was put on trial for illegal campaign donations, with employees for Suarez Corporation Industries donating $5,000 to the campaigns of Jim Renacci and Josh Mandel, the 2012 candidate for Senate against Sherrod Brown, with those employees being reimbursed by their company. Suarez was ultimately acquitted of the charges, but the company's CIO, that's Chief Information Officer, was convicted in a plot to funnel $200,000 to Renacci and Mandel through straw donors, someone who uses another person's money to make a donation in their own name. On May 20th of this year, a fundraiser for Mandel was hosted by Jeff Anstead, the CEO of American Broadband and Telecommunications, a company that was recently fined a record total of $63 million for apparent repeated, systematic, and large-scale violations against a federal program that helps Americans pay their telephone and internet bills. They created many fake customer accounts in order to get millions of dollars in subsidies from the government. The FCC says Anstead used this money to buy a multi-million-dollar condo, an $8 million private jet, and membership to a yacht club. Mandel's salary as state treasurer was $82,000 a year, and his net worth was roughly $600,000. However, in 2017, in his 6th year as state treasurer, his joint net worth, together with his wife, Ilana Shefron, was $5 to $15.7 million, according to released documents from his divorce. So, in 6 years, Mandel's worth roughly increased by over 8 times as much at the lowest possible estimate of its extent, and over 26 times at its highest. In 2020, he earned just under $400,000, money that he earned via jobs on the corporate boards of Capital Community Bank, Athene Insurance, Shear Financial Services, and Legal Business Services. Josh Mandel has always tied himself to Trump as closely as possible, but after dropping out of the 2018 Senate race against Sherrod Brown, he disappeared from the field of play. He wasn't a regular at political or fundraising events. Former Ohio GOP political director Cameron Sagester said Josh Mandel wasn't involved in the Trump campaign in Ohio in any meaningful way, and anyone who suggests otherwise is being misleading. Thousands of volunteers, grassroots activists, elected officials, and party leaders put in a tremendous amount of time and work to win Ohio for Donald Trump, but Josh Mandel was not one of them. Chris Hacks from Claremont County, Ohio, said, "I am not aware of him being at any events or doing anything." During Mandel's first Senate bid in 2012, he was vocally pro-NAFTA, so it was no wonder he was silent when Donald Trump passed the USMCA. He was also silent during Trump's first impeachment and dropped off the face of the earth while the media was defaming him every waking hour. If there weren't an open Senate seat for Josh Mandel to run for once again, who knows if we would have seen him at all ever again. We have a man trying to be Trump's biggest ally. He loves Trump so much, he stole his entire brand and copies his talking points to appeal to his voters. So where was he when Trump needed him the most? The only time you hear from Josh Mandel is when he sees the opportunity to advance his career by running for office yet again. Fortunately, it doesn't seem Mandel's campaign is built to last. It's only been a few months since he announced, and while he maintains a polling lead, he is on shaky ground. He's been dating Rachel Wilson, his campaign finance director, since August of 2020, and Mandel is losing campaign staffers left and right because of the toxic work environment that his squeeze is allegedly perpetuating by cussing out her subordinates, calling them names, and demanding they work 12-hour days. He's already switched fundraising agreements, and he's seen an exodus of fundraisers abandoning his campaign lately. I expect this to continue because if his 2012 Senate bid can teach us anything, it's that he's an exceptionally weak candidate, not even capable of outrunning Mitt Romney, one of the worst candidates for Ohio in recent memory. With all of the information that we have access to, we know that it is oftentimes true that those who cling closest to Trump and emulate his rhetoric closest are those who are the least legitimate in their ideology. Be wary of those who have nothing original to offer you. Be wary of those who have nothing but the words and ideas of someone else. True national populists do not need to cling to Trump in order to prove themselves because they can back it up with their own ideas, rhetoric, and policy. What Josh Mandel is not, at his core, is a man of ideas. Neither is Timken. She's never had to come up with a single idea in her life. J.D. Vance, the man who will ultimately win this race, is different on that front. But that's a topic for a future video. In the meantime though, you can check out my old video on J.D. Vance while you wait. That'll be in the description. Before we end, I've now been accused twice of being paid to shill by the Vance campaign, and I find these accusations completely absurd because I have less than 1,000 subscribers and less than 1,000 followers on Twitter. Why I, of all people, would be paid to write pro-Vance tweets or pro-Vance content is beyond me, but I would like to say that I definitely think that some campaign out there should pay me to make content for them because money is a fantastic incentive to pump videos out like this. That being said, I'm going to continue to make these videos on a regular basis, and I request that you guys like, subscribe, share, and comment as usual. This has been the Yankee Perspective, and I hope you've enjoyed. Take care.